So there was obviously a rumor that also came out saying that Vasiliy Lomachenko would fight Shakur Stevenson after this fight. There was a talk about that. So my question to you, Bryan, is what happens if Vasiliy Lomachenko beats Devin Haney?
I think two things. One, this in terms of Shakur Stevenson, because I think Shakur Stevenson is not only good enough, but he's overqualified to be next in waiting. We'll get to the rankings in 1 second. The other possibility is the Devin Haney rematch. And I think if it's close enough, which I think if Vasiliy Lomachenko wins, it'll probably be a close fight. I think this will be a close fight regardless, or at least should be. Yeah. I think, Devin Haney will be entitled to a rematch at that point. I don't know if there's a rematch clause actually, so we should look that up. But I think Devin Haney, regardless, like George Kambosos got a rematch. Devin Haney should get a rematch. No disrespect. And in terms of contenders, look, Lomachenko is ranked number 1 by the WBC right now. William Zepeda is ranked number 1 by the WBA, number 5 by the WBC. He's somebody else who should be in this conversation, I guess, but I don't think he's going to fight any of these guys next. But at some point, maybe he fights Tank. Who knows? Gustavo Lemos, IBF number 1 contender. Lomachenko also WBO. Shocking. Number 1 contender. Other contenders, Isaac Cruz, number 2 in WBC, number 5 in all other sanctioning bodies. Frank Martin, number 2 WBA. Tank versus Frank Martin. That's a fight you can make next.
Yeah.
I would like to see that in the meantime, right? Shakur Stevenson is also somebody who we just talked about. Number 2 WBO, 3 and 4 otherwise. And we know Shakur Stevenson is really the guy in waiting on the ESPN side of this. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. So is that what you think, Lomachenko, what will happen? That will be his route, a couple of those other guys on the list? Like if
it's Shakur 1 and Devin Haney rematch 2. I think it's one of those things.
I think we would probably get the rematch before if there is a rematch clause. Like we should have probably looked that up. But I think if Devin loses, I'm sure they would run it back because the way that Top Rank is pushing this fight and the way that they're promoting it, I mean, they're promoting the hell out of this fight right now. And so I think there would be a rematch if Devin Haney lost. And I think the numbers would probably do well in that as well. And then, of course, Shakur Stevenson. If Vasiliy Lomachenko wins, then you want to see him against a guy like Shakur Stevenson automatically. I think that's a big, massive fight, probably a pay-per-view fight as well, you would think. And here's the thing, though. At 35 years old, if Lomachenko, and I think we have to talk about this because he's at the latter end of his career, because what we've seen from Lomachenko is we've seen him be dominant at 126, dominant at 130, and then have a bit of a run at 135, lose to Teofimo Lopez. Everyone's taking him off the pound for pound list, not Ring Magazine apparently though. And, then we kind of see him. The thing about Loma is he has a good fight, then kind of has a little bit of an average fight, has a good fight, but we always kind of see him rebound after that. And even against the Jermaine Ortiz fight, start off a little slow as Loma usually does. Jermaine Ortiz definitely had some moments in that fight. And at this point, at 35 years old, what else does Loma have to prove? Because this is what he wants. He wants to be undisputed. So this is essentially his biggest fight right now would be this fight with Devin Haney. And if he wins, I think he could also sail off into the sunset and call it a career. Like, I think we also have to mention that he could possibly retire because what else does Loma have to prove after this fight? If he wins?
I think he more so retires if he loses, maybe, because then I don't know what's going to happen unless Devin Haney does something else and then Vasiliy Lomachenko fights Shakur Stevenson, on the way out, like one last payday type of thing, and then Shakur Stevenson potentially wins that, and then Lomachenko's done. But I think if he wins, there's more money to be made. Like, fight Shakur Stevenson, take the Devin Haney rematch. Like, if he does win this fight, let's also mention that Vasiliy Lomachenko, to me, as he's sort of aging now, he's 35. At lightweight, he's 7-1 with 3 knockouts. Was also dropped in his first fight at lightweight against Linares, but he got back up and put him away in round 10, right? But the performances to your point haven't been as consistent. I feel like he's been great in totality, right?
Yeah.
And he's got
Also
some
dealing
big
with
wins.
injuries as well. Remember, like Loma's been recovering from some injuries and everything like that. So.
Happens with aging and time in the sport. Like, this is somebody who had almost 400 amateur fights famously, right?
Never
Like,
lost in the amateurs either.
Just once. And he, Linares, Jose Pedraza, Anthony Crolla, Luke Campbell, like there's some dudes on this list. And then you get to the Teofimo Lopez loss, which I thought was a clear loss. I had it 115, 113 for Teofimo, or 116, 112, I forget. But I definitely had it for Teofimo
It was
Lopez.
close, yeah.
And then, the Nakatani win, Richard Comey, whom he didn't put away, although he thought the ref should have stopped the fight, which, he had a point. And then Jermaine Ortiz, which is that's the first time where I was really like, oh, maybe he's not the same Lomachenko of old. But I also think Jermaine Ortiz should get a lot of credit for that performance because Jermaine Ortiz is slick. I think he's somebody who's still getting better. I wanted him to fight Shakur Stevenson at one point, and that's the fight I would like to make. If we're doing matchmaking, if Devin Haney, if Vasiliy Lomachenko wins this fight and gets a rematch with Devin Haney, because Devin Haney and him are going to run it back, and Shakur Stevenson has to wait. Shakur Stevenson versus Jermaine Ortiz, that'd be perfectly capable opponent. That'd be a perfectly good fight to make. You could do it on Top Rank, and on top of that, Ortiz is somebody who he was giving Lomachenko the business at one point. I think Lomachenko won that fight. It'd be a good measuring stick to see how he compares to somebody who fought against Lomachenko already.
But I don't even think we give enough credit for Loma to taking that fight, because that's a fight that I think a lot of people wouldn't have wanted to take at that point in his career. But Loma took it because that's not an easy fight against a guy like Jermaine Ortiz, who's coming up and who's probably going to be a problem as well. He's a really, really good boxer. And I think in Loma's position at that point where people were questioning if he still had it, like, props to him for taking that fight. And I think he did enough to win that fight. It's just those slow Loma starts, right? Like the slow start against Teofimo Lopez really did it in for him. And Teo was doing work outboxing him. And so we're going to get into it with the preview. I'm not going to get into it too much here, but I think there is a possibility depending on what happens. And you're right. Like if he loses, the only reason why I think if he loses, he doesn't retire, because I don't think Loma wants to go out like that. I don't think we're going to see Loma go out and retire on a loss. Maybe he fights a guy like Isaac Cruz or, something like that.
I don't know if I want to do that before retiring.
Hey, man, but the way that he's fighting, though, like he's not scared, right? Like Loma isn't scared. I think if there was a rematch and he lost again, maybe he would retire if he gave it his all. But it's interesting to see because he's at a different point in his career. I think he's like 10 years older than Devin Haney. Yeah. So it's a total different fight, and they're in total different stages in his career. So really telling what will happen with Loma, I think there's bigger questions if he loses this fight than if he wins. Because if he wins, he's back on top, man, and we can't really say anything because then he beat Devin Haney. And Loma's back on, then he just stays and he just keeps going up on that pound for pound list.
So if he beats Devin Haney, which would be surprising to me. I'm not going to give away my pick. But if he does, like, what happens next for Devin Haney if it's not a rematch? Let's say that they don't. And let's say Top Rank goes right into Vasiliy Lomachenko, Shakur Stevenson later this year. What happens to Devin Haney?
I think there has to be talks about him fighting Tank at that point. Because who else?
Really? Lose to Lomachenko then go into Tank?
Oh, no, sorry. I thought you said win. If he,
no. If Devin Haney loses this fight, because we're talking about if Lomachenko wins, obviously. If Devin Haney loses this fight, what happens next to him? If Vasiliy Lomachenko ends up defending the title against Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, what happens next?
Well, it depends. Like, are the rumors true about him moving up to 140?
He probably would at that point, right?
I would think so, because it's like you've done everything that you can do at 135. If there's no rematch, then I would think Devin would move up to 140. And I think there are some like interesting fights at 140 where he could fight a guy like a Jose Ramirez, or he could fight a guy like an Arnold Barbosa Jr. And, and then potentially maybe get a fight. And I know like Regis signed with Matchroom, but if Devin Haney was to do work at 140, I would want to see. Yeah.
He could also move.
He could also go to Matchroom. There was also
he could take Devin Haney promotions somewhere else.
And remember, like he was signed to Matchroom at one point, right? So would he go back? That's the biggest question, because I mean, if he was to move to 140, yeah, I'd want to see him against Regis. I want to see Regis against everybody though, so that's the thing.
Yeah, you don't want to see Regis against Liam Paro. as much as you want to see Regis.
I do, because I'm excited to see Regis fight, but I think there's way better fights.
You want
for
more
Regis.
names?
Yeah.
I
want more names.
Look, if Devin Haney, unlike Rolly Romero, if Devin Haney lost to Vasiliy Lomachenko and then walked into a title match at 140, I'd kind of be like, especially if it's against, Regis later this year on Matchroom, on the zone card rather.
Ooh, wait, hold up, wait a minute. Devin Haney versus Teofimo Lopez, because this is two guys that have been going at it for a little while, right? Like, didn't they fight each other in the amateurs?
I'm sure that they did. Devin Haney wins that fight, in my opinion. But
it's still a fight. I think that's a blockbuster fight.
I mean, it depends on. It depends on. No, yeah. Look, betting wise, it's gonna be close. Like, but a lot of it hinges upon what happens in terms of like how they look in their upcoming fights. Like, if Teofimo Lopez puts away Josh Taylor like very early, which I don't think is going to happen.
I don't think, yeah.
But if that happens, because if he channels that explosive Teofimo Lopez again and just catches him, who knows, right? But I think the point of it is, though, I think there are a lot of interesting Devin Haney options, even if he does lose this fight. Whereas I think Vasiliy Lomachenko is more of a straight line of either Devin Haney rematch or Shakur Stevenson. Just like how we talked about earlier, if Devin Haney wins this fight, I think it's a straight line to Shakur Stevenson at that point, and hopefully a future fight with Gervonta Davis. But Lomachenko, then I have questions about what he does next after a loss. So it's weird. It's weird. I think Devin Haney probably has more options both ways than Lomachenko at this point, which is not a bad thing necessarily. It's to say that because Lomachenko still has money options on the table. I just feel like there aren't as many, but those are good fights. Those are really good fights for Lomachenko regardless.
Yeah, and I don't think we see like Loma moving up to 140. I don't think that happens. I think he stays at 135. I do think, though, that there is a possibility, even though Bill Haney shut down the rumors that he was going to move up to 140. I mean, in boxing, people say things and then do something else. So I think there's a big chance, because even at that point, like, if he was to fight Shakur after he won, that would be a massive fight. But then if he beats Shakur, what's next? You would have to move up after that. If he was to beat Shakur, and that's like a big if, right? Depending on who you want to go with. But
I think Haney is a future welterweight. Like, I think 5 years down the line, we may be talking about him at 147. You know what I mean?
Dude,
like
he's massive. Like, dude, he's massive. And we're going to talk about that when we break down the fight. We also have a betting preview coming out as well. Lots coming up on the mandatory this week. We want to know your thoughts, though. Let us know what you think happens if Devin Haney beats Vasiliy Lomachenko, or if Vasiliy Lomachenko beats Devin Haney. Drop some comments below. Also hit us up on our social media pages. We're at TheMandatory TKO pretty much everywhere. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. That's where you can find us. So make sure to follow us. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. Bryan, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Can't wait for this fight. And we'll also remind people we will not just preview Devin Haney versus Vasiliy Lomachenko, but we will also preview Katie Taylor, Shantelle Cameron, another undisputed title fight that's going to happen. That's going to get overlooked on Saturday, but we will have a preview and some betting to do on that fight as well. So make sure y'all stay tuned for that.